time goes by. There's a rhythm of the year. For me, there's a rhythm of the months. The second week of each month is my time to give the Dharma Talk without any intro talk. And I don't know for you, but for me there's a sense, there's almost a relentless quality of the calendar. It just goes, whether we like it or not. Whatever our opinion or our idea about it may be, and even whether we believe it or not, time goes by, days turn into weeks, and then suddenly it's the next month. I notice when I get up for morning practice that it's darker than it was a month ago. Looking at Julie, some of you in this room are teachers. School is about to start again. I was struck when I asked us to dedicate the Kwanzaa Bon Soeng chanting to Dr. Cordova, and it struck me that, as far as I can tell from the messages I get from Veracruz, it sounds like he's about to die. And I suppose perhaps something surprising may happen and he won't die now. But it is a reminder that as time is relentless, so is the moment of our death. Some of us in this room are younger and can feel that point of death or old age and sickness is far away. Others of us are a little bit closer, it seems. But even there, the world is quite topsy-turvy. We may think, oh, I'm the young one, it'll be somebody else. But maybe not. The world has a way of surprising us. And from a Zen practice perspective, it's very important to remember that death is around the corner. And things will happen between now and then. Some things we'll like, some things we won't like. People close to us will die. Maybe people close to us will disappoint us. Maybe the dreams we have for our lives will manifest, but we won't be so sure that's really what we wanted after all. Maybe we'll just be thrilled. Maybe we'll be disappointed. No matter what it is that marks the time that we have, it will end. And Zen practice begins with that recognition that even this will pass. It's often talked about in Zen literature and Zen talks as the great work of life and death. As I say that, I remember, I think it's in the temple rules, it says, time will not wait for anyone. It won't wait for you. You know how we often feel like, wait a minute, I'm just catching up now. And then we lose it. Things come, things go. That's the rhythm of life. To me, this question of life and death, I'm reminded a few weeks ago, Karen gave the Dharma Talk and she talked about reincarnation. And I said at the end of her talk, I said, I've never been that concerned about reincarnation. In the temple rules, Zen Master Bon Soeng writes, if you die tomorrow, what kind of body will you get? Isn't this of great importance? I think that it says, hurry up, hurry. And I always listen, I say, I'm not sure it's of great importance. But this, to me, for me in my practice, this recognition of death, which I first heard about when I was in college reading the teachings of Don Juan. He talked about death being on your left shoulder, and that death was your advisor. And that really struck me. So it's been with me my whole adult life, just kind of sitting back here. Sometimes I forget, but something happens and I remember. And for me, the point of this question of life and death points us right back to, how do I live this life? The recognition of death, that can scare us, that could make us worry. But to me, more importantly, it opens up that question, how then shall I live? What shall I do? This time I have is finite. How do I live it? What do I do with it? And that brings up the question of everything from the large questions of what path do I take, what career do I have, how do I make choices, the big choices in my life, to, I think, even more importantly, how do I live this moment, right now? How do I face this moment? How do I deal with this experience as it arises? As I'm presented with this particular challenge, what do I do? And there are probably, I don't know how to count them, thousands of them every day. How do we choose to live? How do we make the choices that we make? How, perhaps, do we have the clarity to see clearly enough to be able to make those choices with wisdom, with compassion, with love, with concern not just for me, but for the whole universe? Or in a more finite way, for the people and things and animals and environment that is impacted by this, by my action in this very moment. So, I've been thinking a little bit about this because in the next couple of months I will be performing 2 weddings. One of them is for someone I know, in a sense, through the work I do here at the Zen Center. And one of them is for my niece. My older brother's daughter is getting married, and I'll be doing the wedding. I've turned into something of a family priest. In my wife's family, I think I've done 5 weddings. I've done her sister, her 2 nieces, and my wife's sister's second husband has 2 sons, and I've done one of the weddings for him and the 2 nieces from my wife's sister. Does that add up to 5? I think it does. It seems like they're all. I'm an easy target. And now, I've co-led my younger brothers. I did my nephews, and now I'll be doing my nieces. So it's very interesting doing all these family weddings. I've given up doing weddings for people I don't know. But for people I know, it's quite interesting. And it's really quite a privilege, especially when you know the person and you know the people involved, to be right there in the front. Some of you have done weddings, I think. And weddings are, in a way, they're easy because they're about love. Everybody comes really pulling for the people who are getting married and really loving and caring them. And everybody is quite disposed to be grateful and happy. So as the officiant, it's kind of easy because everybody always says, oh, how wonderful it was, because everybody's in that kind of mood. But it strikes me that as I'm thinking about performing the wedding, it's a good example of how to bring our practice into the relationships that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about marriage, but it's really not just about marriage. It's about human relationships. And I suppose it's also about our relationship to the planet, to the environment, to animals, to things that we think are insignificant. You know, we talk a lot in our Quantum School of Zen. We have this phrase, correct situation, correct relationship, and correct function. And often when I talk about correct relationship, I'm talking about perceiving your relationship to a particular situation. That numbers of people may be involved in a situation. Each person has a different particular relationship to that situation. So that's not what I'm talking about here. Now I'm talking about how do we treat each other? With what kind of mind and heart do we enter into relationship with each other? Of course, if it's a marriage, you're bringing together two people, creating a family. Hopefully, idealistically, I suppose, people go into marriages hoping that it will be a lifelong endeavor. I guess the statistics are it works about half the time. But maybe it worked even when they break up. You just hope it to be a lifetime, but maybe it's just for the time that you're together. But I wonder if one of the reasons that relationships break is because people aren't treating each other correctly. They forget. We become so self-centered that my needs become paramount. And it's very easy for us to treat the other as an object whose main purpose is to satisfy me. And I would contend that that's not a correct relationship, and that's to live our lives that way will, in a sense, doom us to unsatisfying relationships and creating the painful karmic conditions that just go on and on and on and on. You know, a lot of times as a psychotherapist, when I work with people, if you start to trace back family history, and you go to the grandparent relationship, followed into the parental relationship, and then the child relationship, and then very often as an adult creating another generation, you find that the lineage is passed down over time. We're quite affected, I'm sure, by the lives and conditions and behaviors of our grandparents. And of course, they're impacted by their parents and grandparents. So in the Native American tradition, they talk about 7 generations. But it probably goes all the way back. Every action has its reaction. Every result is the next cause. We talk a lot about that here. So the action in this moment lives on for quite some time. So what we do and how we approach our relationships and the things in our lives are actually quite important. When I've kind of reduced my marriage talk to 3 things. So over the years, it's changed a lot, but it kind of comes down to me to wisdom, compassion, and empathy. That in the sense of wisdom, to be in relationship and bring wisdom to that relationship has something to do with what the Buddha talked about when he talked about right view. And again, those of you who've heard me give countless Dharma talks will know that when I talk about right view, I sometimes say right view means no view. Right view means seeing things clearly. As we get locked into our own particular view, everything gets colored. And in as much as we live a self-centered life, that coloring is all about me. And again, if we're not careful, that means I use you as an object to satisfy my needs. And probably all of us can look into our family lives and see how that manifests. If we watch our own life, which is really much more important, because that's the one thing we have some say over, we can easily notice when we lose the clarity of the wisdom of seeing clearly and slant things towards our own self-interest. Those of you who are in close, intimate marriages or live in relationships, just look to yesterday and see what happened when you lost your wisdom and you moved into self-centered I, my, me. And look at the result. I know for myself, as I watch my relationship with my wife, when we argue and fight, I have a reasonable point of view generally. But that doesn't mean I'm right. And that doesn't mean that I'm not skewed towards some particular idea of what I think should be. And the wisdom is to be clear enough to be able to listen. To be able to, for me, it's knowing. There's a Paul Simon song I particularly like, and there's a line that goes something like, I might be wrong, I've been wrong before, I'll probably be wrong again. And I take that to mean, and even right now, as certain as I am of my rightness, there's a part of me that's aware that I might be wrong. And on one hand, that can be quite destabilizing, to enter into every situation with remembering that I might be wrong. But for me, it's a touchstone of wisdom. Because as I'm arguing my point, I'm remembering I could be wrong. And if I remember I could be wrong, that means I have to stay open enough to listen. To realize that this other person, this other being, also has wisdom. And connected with that, I've talked about this before too, that I've become, I suppose you could say, painfully aware of assumptions that I make, and those assumptions that are often wrong. Sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. And the thing about assumptions is that they seem so obvious, and sometimes they're not even acknowledged because you just assume it and live life as if it's so. So for me, one of the important things I look for day to day are those places where my assumptions lead me in the world to be wrong. And though I can't say I like to be wrong, I've grown to be somewhat pleased or happy when my assumptions are proved wrong, because it's another chance to let go. It's another chance to listen, to be humble enough to pay attention. And what I'm suggesting here isn't just something you should try on. I think we all need to investigate our lives and see it for ourselves in our own life. I'm trying to point a direction here, but I often say that if people could do it, we would. So it's not like it's easy to say, just try this. Although I think it would be a good idea to just try this. But trying it means witnessing, And that's where our Zen practice as a practice comes in. We're practicing to be aware. We're practicing to notice. We sit here in silence, breathing in and breathing out. We're practicing to be aware of the experience as it's happening. Some of that is being aware of our thought process. Some of it is being aware of our feeling process. Some of it is being aware of the assumptions we make. But all of it is about finding the clarity to witness what's actually happening in the moment. So having the wisdom to meet somebody and to appreciate them as an individual, as a being who is equal to me. Really, none of us are any more important than any other one of us. We make value judgments. I'm more important than you, or maybe even you're more important than me. But those are just value judgments. In reality, each one of us has the integrity of being a live being. And each live being, each sentient being, has its place in this world. And we make a value judgment that one is more important than another, but that's only our thinking. Each one of us is equal. Each thing in this universe is equal. And to treat each other that way changes everything. In the standardized marriage ceremony in the Quantum School of Zen, and I just pulled this out of the Dharma Mirror. There are 9 vows, and they each have a correspondence to there are 9 vows, but the first 8 of them each have a correspondence to the Eightfold Path. So, the first one, correct view. We vow in our married life together to continually break through our preconceived views of each other and see clearly. To recognize that I have preconceived views. I have, almost by nature, I have put you in a box and made you smaller than who you really are. So my job is to allow myself to be surprised, to allow you to show me who you are, and to be mindful and careful of how I put you in a box and make you into an object. Sometimes when I work with people, it's said that the people closest to us are the ones who resist our change more than anyone else. We get comfortable with our partners or our friends or our Sangha mates being who we think they are. And your changing can be quite destabilizing for me. So I may do a lot to keep you penned up in that box because that's how I know you. And I've learned to be comfortable with that, even if I don't like a lot of what gets presented in that box. It still can be more comfortable. So our practice is to notice and to let go. And as we breathe so deeply into our bellies, breathing in slowly, what am I? Breathing out, don't know. We gain the stability, the confidence, and the mindful attention to let each other be. I used to think it was in this marriage ceremony, but I can't find it. But the vow that I thought we took was, I vow to help you manifest your true nature. That's a way to live life. I vow to help you become your true self. I vow to help you break free of the bonds that hold you back, from truly expressing who you are and manifesting that in your life. And in a sense, giving that gift to the universe. So my job as a partner, as a friend, as a person together with you walking this path, is to help you be who you are. And honestly, if we can do that with the most intimate person and even the most distant person, then we're doing our jobs as bodhisattvas. Then we're bringing peace and love and harmony to the world. Then we're really making this world a better place. Not fitting the image of what I think it would be if it were a better place, but creating the conditions so this life can be, I almost want to say maximized, but that probably isn't quite the right word. And as I talk about vows, whether it's in a marriage or just each of us taking vows in our own life, I often wonder, what is a vow? And what's different between a vow and a promise? I was reading a Dharma talk given by my friend Norman Fisher the other day, and he claimed, and I don't know if this is true or not, but 1,000 years ago, there was a worldview that if you took a vow, something changed in your body. There was a physical change that happened. That a vow isn't just a promise or a suggestion or saying, well, I'll try to do this. That when you take a vow, physically things change. And I think my assumption, and I've been wrong before, as I've told you, that's probably not true, that our physical body changes. But it points to how deep a vow actually is. It's not just saying, I'll do it. It's saying, I vow to do it. And if we really vow something, how much do we back that up? What does that mean to vow? Every morning we chant the 4 great vows. First one, I vow to help save all sentient beings. It's a nice idea, but if I live my life forgetting that vow and only are after my own well-being, it's not really a vow. It's a nice idea that I'm mouthing the words to. A vow needs to be backed up by action and perseverance and commitment. A vow points to something even when I don't want to, even when I don't like it, to stay with it. And I'm not suggesting that vows can't be broken, but to break a vow, if we take a vow, should mean something, and to not do it lightly. I suppose if you believe in God, a vow has something to do with that deep a commitment. Somehow you're evoking the divinity, and you're saying, in this vertical relationship, I'm accountable. It's that deep. I suppose another word could be a covenant. Like the founders, I guess the writers of the Declaration of Independence said, we'll vow this together and we'll die together to protect this. So a vow is quite deep. And every day we vow to help save all sentient beings. We vow to recognize delusion and cut through delusion. We vow to learn the teachings. We vow to attain the Buddha way. Each of these vows is literally impossible. But that's the depth that we take this on. And the reason I'm talking about it, I guess, is it's very standard. Every marriage I've ever witnessed has vows. You can do them without vows, but it's the central piece. So, what are we vowing? And forgetting about marriage for a second, what vows do we take in our own life? How seriously is our commitment to our practice? That's a vow too. There's a bodhisattva vow. When we take on this practice and ask this question, what am I? There's a vow in there to really look deeply, to perceive, what am I? So of course I'm talking longer than I expected. And maybe in 2 minutes I'll just touch in the last two. Compassion is quite clearly the flip side of vowing to help you attain your true self. My heart is open, my eyes are clear. I'm in this to help you, not just to get for me. The last one I don't think is quite as easily seen, but empathy, different from compassion. Empathy is being able to put myself in your shoes, even if it seems bizarre to me, to be able to see the world more from your perspective and see the logic, the direction that this particular moment means to you. Because you're coming from a whole different set of circumstances from me. And I'm saying you and me, and I'm not literally meaning me and you, it's all of us. All of us hold the me position. And we look out and see you. And you is always a little bizarre, because your logic is different than mine. Your idea, your assumptions, your conditions that you arise out of are different. So, almost by definition, it doesn't really make sense to me what you are doing. But if I can put myself, if I can turn it around and try to put myself in your position, get a feeling for your conditions that are arising in this moment, I think there's more of a possibility for my heart to open, to give you a little more space. To, again, if the deepest vow is to help you become your true self, then that empathy, that turning around and looking at it from your perspective will allow me to better help you. Because if I'm just looking from my perspective, I'm back to putting you in a box. But if I can turn it around and see a little bit from your perspective, the world, actually, I'm better off. Because once I do that, the world is so much bigger. The conditions are so much wider. Because almost by definition, my conditions are narrow. They grow out of my experience. But if I can turn it around and really get a feeling for your experience, that opens my mind. And our Zen practice is about opening. I think to really practice Zen, you have to start from the assumption that I have a limited, narrow view. And to wake up, to attain this Buddha way, means to open, to have a wider, more expansive, more inclusive view. You know, somebody rich has a hard time understanding what it's like to be poor. You know, you see about it all the time. Somebody will purposefully put themselves in a position to understand what it's like. And the more power we have, I think the more important empathy actually is. So, I did want to leave some time for questions or comments. So, anything anybody wants to ask, or just hold on 1 second. Any questions, comments, anything anybody wants me to talk about?
just thinking about this, it's probably obvious to everybody, but when you fall in love with somebody, you do see them as separate at first. And then you're really aware of that, and you're very...
And usually pretty idealized.
Right, and idealized. And then, of course, you get familiar, and all of a sudden, all those wonderful things become annoying. But...
funny how that works.
Yeah, it's the same thing that's sort of true for practice. When I think back to when I started practice many years ago, it was so easy at first.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know why people say it's so hard. I can really kind of observe things with the beginner's mind, and then all of a sudden, it's comfortable and not so easy anymore. So it's kind of, it's like falling in love with your practice.
Yeah. And real love is not the idealized love.
Right, and so,
and that's real
but it
practice.
kind of keeps you going, in a way. For me, sometimes when practice gets hard, it can help to, the same way in a relationship, it can keep it going when, you've had that experience of falling in love or that beginner's mind.
Yeah. In some ways, in not just in a marriage or a partnership, but our challenge is to fall in love over and over again. To not rest on the old love, but
with our eyes more open.
Yeah. I think for me, the word I used was to be surprised. I'm always happy when I'm surprised, even if I don't like the surprise. But just, I've been with my wife for, it's not quite 40 years, but it's getting there. But I'm still surprised, and that makes me happy. And practice the same way.